Shalom and welcome back to the Rashi Nosh. I'm Pastor Matt.
And I'm Kara.
This week, we're in a brand new book of the Torah. We're in Sefer Shemot, the book of names, or in English, Exodus. So we're about to meet someone very important. You know, there are certain mile markers on our Torah journey. Genesis 12 is one because we meet Abraham. And of course, the book of Exodus is one because we meet Moses. So, since this book is called Shemot, or Names, in our JPS Rashi Torah commentary, Torah discussion commentary, we have a discussion on names. So we're on page 41, if you are following along with us in this wonderful book. And this first section is called Name Calling. And it says this: as every successful politician knows, addressing someone by name evokes feelings of warmth and closeness. Parashat Shemot, or Names, begins by recounting the names of Jacob's sons who accompanied him to Egypt. These are the names of the sons of Israel, Jacob, who came to Egypt with Jacob, each coming with his household. This is from Exodus 1:1. Given that the names of Jacob's sons were previously mentioned, Rashi explains why they are repeated here. Rashi says, these are the names of the sons of Israel. Although God counted them in their lifetime by their names, he counted them again after their death to let us know how precious they were to him, because they were likened to the stars, which he takes out and brings in by number and by their names. As it states in Isaiah 40:26, he who sends out their host by count and who calls them each by name. This is Rashi's comment on Exodus 1:1. And when it says their host, it means all the heavenly bodies, all the stars. By repeating the names of Jacob's sons, Rashi tells us that God focused attention on and thereby expressed affection for each son individually. In today's wired age, most of us do not have to remember friends' phone numbers and birthdays as people once did. Moreover, in a single session with just a few clicks, we can arrange to send all our friends birthday e-cards for the year. We have also become accustomed to having full conversations with people via text or email without ever using their names. Perhaps now more than ever, addressing another person by name can amplify our shared sense of connection. I would say I have to agree. And although it's convenient to not have to remember these things, I mean, I remember your phone number because you've had it and I've had mine long enough before we were only on speed dial. But I would be hard pressed to remember.
I don't even know our kids' numbers.
I don't know our kids' numbers by heart either. I push their little name and their picture and that's how I get to it. But interestingly enough, I can still remember the phone number that I had at my house 40 years ago. I still remember that number because I had to. You had to memorize these things, but we just don't have to anymore. And I think it's convenient to open up Facebook and see, I just did it today. Oh, I have a friend whose birthday is today. Let me wish him a happy birthday. It wasn't even on my radar until my technology reminded me of it. So there are a couple of questions that I want to go over as we do every week, because this is a Torah discussion commentary. We're going to look at questions 2 and 3 on page 41. And the first one that we're going to look at says this: do you ever have difficulty remembering people's names? What methods do you use to help remember them? Now, this is almost a joke because I am horrible with names. I try to get better, but I sometimes, and especially in ministry, like at our church where we pastor, it happens all the time that we'll have a new person or a new family come, and it really does take a few weeks to get into the rhythm of remembering their names. Now, the method that I use, I don't know if you do this as well, and if so, I apologize for taking your answer, but the method that I use is that I know people that are really good with names. And so I'll try to ask them, oh, I can't remember that person's name. They've been coming for a couple of weeks and I can't remember the name. Do you remember their name? And then they will tell me their name. Now, if they can't remember, the method that I use is I've always thought that when you're at a loss, being honest about that is probably the best thing that you can do. And so I have a standard sentence that I say to someone. I say, please remind me of your name. And that way I'm not only getting their name, but I'm also telling them that I'm apologizing for not being great with names.
Yeah, I'm a very visual person. So for me, if I see the name written down, like when people wear name tags, that
Mm.
is amazing for me. I know it's kind of cheesy or whatever, but when I see it, it helps me when I see it written down. And so like on Wednesdays when we have the youth, when I'm writing their name down for their orders, you know what I mean? I can see it and I'm looking at their face. It helps me way better. But I tend to be someone who, if I'm trying to learn, I'm honest with it too. And I'll say, I'm really bad with memorizing names. And I'll just say, I'm going to say your name a million times today. And so I'll just be like, hey, Darcy, nice to meet you, Darcy. And then 2 seconds later, I'll be like, hey, Darcy. And I'll just say it over and over and over and over. And that sometimes, if I can't see it written, sometimes that'll help sink it in. So it'll be like I've seen them a lot in one time, but it's been a short period of time, but I've just said it so many times that
Yes.
sometimes I can, so I might be obnoxious in that way, but that's the only way I can do it without just having it physically written down. Sometimes I will just open my phone and I'll write something like new person with short gray hair and I'll write their name. And then that way, when I see it, I can look at it over and over and try to memorize it, but I'm bad about it too.
Sometimes I try to think of a hook or something, a memory tool that I can think of. It's sad that it's myself. If I was another person, I would just always remember Matt wears a hat. I would just remember that, like I'm the Matt in the hat. And so that's a way that I could remember. There's a dear friend of ours that we have known. I think we probably got married around the same time. But a couple in my brother Josh's church, the bishops, and Chris Bishop. When I first met him, for some reason, well, it's an obvious reason. I'm bad with names at first, so I think I accidentally called him something else, Jeff or something.
I think it was Chris.
Chris.
No, yeah, you're talking about Chris.
Yeah,
Yeah.
about Chris Bishop. Yeah. So I think I called him Jeff or some other name. And that just became a little joke between us. And it was, I think the way that it naturally happened was, oh, it's good to see you again, Jeff. And he said something like, oh, nice to see you, John. And I think I said, oh, I'm Matt. And he said, oh, well, I'm Chris. And so we thought that was funny. And so for a couple of years, every time I saw him, I'd be like, hey, Joe, how are you? We would just make up a different name. But then that allowed me to not be so embarrassed that I couldn't think of his name. I just became a little game. Now, when I was in school and in high school, we had a janitor, a custodian that worked for our school that called everyone Joe, whether you were male or female. And every once in a while, if you were a girl, he would call you Josephine, but everyone was Joe. He'd say, hey, Joe, and it was, he never had to remember anyone's name. Now, my dad, because of a certain television show that we loved called Duck Dynasty, there was a man on there that called everyone Jack. And so my dad has gotten into the habit of just saying, hey, Jack, to everyone. I wish I had something like that where I could just call someone, something,
But then you wouldn't have that connection to people though if you
No,
did that. So that's,
exactly. I think
that's the
I'll
whole
just
point is to be more connected by using people's real names.
I'll just be like I was with Chris, and I'll just call someone a name that's not theirs, and then that will prompt them to remind me. Maybe that will be good. But it is true. You do feel more connected with someone when they say your name. It's kind of a nice thing. So the next question that we want to ask is, do you think using online communication causes people to feel more or less connected to other people, or both? If it can cause people to feel anonymous, what can be done to minimize this phenomenon?
I definitely feel like it's a little of both. Online communication, obviously, you can get a little bit of information across at a point at a single time, so it's sometimes your relationships and your interactions aren't as deep or aren't as emotional, or they can be whatever, can they kind of surface because they can be quick, one liners here and there, whether it's through social media or texting or something like that. But at the same time, I feel like there's more opportunity to have those connections, the little connections. So I can see it both ways. They're comment about scheduling out e-cards for everybody. I'm really bad about sending out cards of any kind, but I feel like I'm good at texting someone on their birthday that I'm close to and saying, "Happy birthday, hope, this year's the best," or whatever. And so it would be nothing from me if it was I had to mail a card. Whereas now that I have the opportunity to do something electronically, I can, stay connected to people. I can
Hmm.
connect with my mom more often in a quick text and a phone call, rather than, sometimes I can't visit and things like that. So I think it's a little of both. I think sometimes you could feel a little less connected in some ways, but the opportunities are there if you take them.
Something that this doesn't specifically bring up, but something positive that we can get from being connected online, I think, is group communication. I remember in the past, before group texting or social media, I remember having to call every member of our church board if we needed to schedule an impromptu meeting, if something came up, an emergency or something like that, and we needed to meet in addition to our regularly scheduled meeting, having to call every single member of the board and some not be home, leaving voice messages, having to make a list of who got back with me and who didn't. The fact that I can send one text out to our entire church board
It is
and they
nice.
can get it at their convenience, that they don't have to answer right then, but I know, but probably by the end of the day, or maybe even within a few hours, I'm going to have a response back. And that I think is positive. But I think it's not a substitute for actual in person communication. And that is what we have really found in Europe. We're probably going to find that in Korea and Australia as well. But we have really found in Europe, especially in France, with some of our students there that watch us, and they might be watching with subtitles. They will have somewhat of a connection with us because of them seeing us online, but there's nothing like that face-to-face connection. And I think as good as even things like Zoom or Microsoft Teams or StreamYard, things like this, where we can communicate FaceTime, where we can communicate via video, it's still not as good as in person.
Yeah.
So I think as long as we are using to the best of our ability our connectedness and our technology, not as a substitute for actual communication, that people that we can get with,
Yeah.
then I think there's probably some good ministry that can be done through this. I mean, look at what we're doing right now. We're speaking to you through something that we have filmed digitally, and now it can go out to the whole world. It's really kind of unprecedented. But again, it's important that we know people's names. Our name is our identity, and it's what sets us apart. And sometimes just hearing our name being called by someone that we look up to or someone that we care about can be a very meaningful person.
Yeah.
It is said in Jewish tradition that anyone whose name is called out and repeated in the Bible, they are assured a place in the world to come. Where someone like Samuel, for instance, where God calls out to him, Samuel, Samuel, a repeated name. We see this in the New Testament with Yeshua, Martha, Martha, this repetition of someone's name. It's important that we use that. So we will continue to work at it. We encourage you to continue to work at it by repetition, by maybe little tricks that you have. Maybe another Matt that wears a hat, or something like that, or perhaps a Pat that has a cat. Maybe you can remember that. So thank you. That kind of rhymed. That was nice. That was very nice. Thank you for joining us once again. As every week, we love to do this to discuss the Torah, and If you haven't already subscribed to our channel, please do that. And please share this video on your social media so that the people that you are connected to can share in this experience. Thank you once again, and shalom.